Hey, so you guys remember this? Okay, obviously you remember Monster Hunter Wilds. This is the next monster in the game, and it's really exciting, and it's, you know, only got recently announced. That was a stupid question in hindsight. But the point that I am making is it's been a little bit since we have talked about it, looked at it, focused on it. So you might be sat there going, so why are we about to have another chat about the next and likely best Monster Hunter experience and the already winner of Game of the Year 2025? Seriously, you should say that out loud. It'll make this a very more satisfactory interactive experience. And the answer to that is we've obviously just had the 20th anniversary celebrations for Monster Hunter. And with that in mind, looking at the glorious, beautiful past, it's hard not to then think of the future. But in what context? Well, if you're making a new Monster Hunter game, and you need to add monsters to it, because obviously, you can add some new ones, again, because obviously, that's all well and good, but you're also going to add returning ones. How do you choose which returning monsters to add? What makes sense contextually in this new world and take on Monster Hunter you're creating? Sure. What is just too thematic to ignore? Sure. What deserves another go that hasn't been seen in ages that you think you can really bring something special out of in its new 6th gen form? Sure. Another reason that I can put out here before I get to the point I'm actually trying to make. Sure. But there's always one, right, when you're looking to get as many people excited about the game as possible, and that's kind of popularity. If we're having new monster in the game, it's like, oh, Wilds, here we go! It's the return of, well, you know, Cephadrome, Purple Gypseros, Steel Uragan. I still think that's so funny. It's not exactly going to get people as hype as, yeah, your Nagakuga and your Tigrex and your Gormagala are going to be in it again, even though they were just in the 5th gen, because people want to hunt and fight and face and wear the monsters that they love. But similarly, you can't just keep putting in the same favorites over and over again forever, you know? Zinogre in every monster in the game from now till the end of time. He's the #1 most popular, so that makes sense. And in essence, it does make sense, but eventually you have to give them a breather no matter how loved they are. But how loved they are still is a distinct factor. And obviously what I'm getting at here is we've just now had the most comprehensive, largest ranking of monster popularity ever. And if you're making a Monster Hunter game, if you're looking at Wilds, it's still over a year away. Plenty of development time for monsters. If you've reserved some slots to choose based on sheer popularity, which again makes sense to get people excited, well, this list is something you might look to, and honestly, it makes sense to. It would be almost silly to not. And with that in mind then, which monsters, based on where they ranked, make sense to return in Wilds? I think that's a very interesting conversation, and one we're literally having / about to have. Though with a couple caveats. I am going to exclude everything that has already been in the 5th gen, because I think that doesn't really add to anything, because otherwise it's going to be, yep, put in Zinogre, put in Gormagala, put in Negigante, and so on and so forth. It's like, okay, yeah, put in the top 5 monsters. We did it. That was difficult. Whoa, really took a lot of brain power to work that one out. So what I find more interesting is which 5 monsters got the highest ranking that haven't been in the 5th gen, because they seem like the win-win of interesting, we haven't seen them in a whole generation, choices that still, even so, are going to get people excited because they're really popular. And with that in mind then, let's do this thing. As a little interesting tidbit beforehand, you have to get to rank 82nd to get 5 monsters, not in the 5th gen, that are viable for this. And I'll explain what I mean by viable when it comes to it, but we're actually going to go from most popular to least here, because I think it's more interesting, because we all know, yes, at number 1, Lagiacrus. The Abyssal form came fairly high at 2 in the top 15. It's kind of a no-brainer. I will be genuinely shocked, blown away, if he is not in Wilds. He is the notable missing flagship, and as this poll is now proven, the notable missing monster by how much people love him. And if you want a little bit of evidence on how much the love for a monster actually does matter and influence, the only reason we got Fatalis, who got a really respectable ranking in Iceborne, is because of how much people loved him in his new model for the big last anniversary size comparison. So everyone was like, hey, can we actually have Fatalis back, please? Like, he's really cool. That would be nice. And then they looked into it, and he became the last title update. That wasn't foreplanned. So there really is precedent for this mattering. And when it comes to Lagiacrus, I mean, they know. They tried to put him in World and they couldn't get it working. They need to, of course, fix that, but surely with a team as talented and passionate as the Monster Hunter team clearly, evidently is, that's not going to be a barrier for long. So yeah, Lagiacrus I think makes sense. I would be surprised if he's not in Wilds, and I think this poll really is that kind of final piece of the puzzle for, yeah, I can't wait to hunt him again in a proper new modern form. Also, I'm fairly convinced that that looks like not just a new Lagiacrus render, but a new Lagiacrus model. If I was inclined to get a bit conspiratorial there, maybe it's already happened / happening? Question mark? Then we do answer that viable word I used, because technically the next 3 are Gogmazios, Dalamadur, and Atalkar, but they're big boy end boss spectacle fights that just don't come back. They're not really, as I said, viable encounters because of their very nature. We're really just going to have Gogmazios wandering around Wilds. Don't get me wrong, I would adore that, but he in his existence is a climactic experience, so having him just along the way through the story as a random urgent quest would be a little bit weird. The same with Dalamadur, the same with Atalkar. Though in the context of Worlds, and Atalkar in the desert with a new Nesto would be quite fun, but I think the bossy fights just sort of wouldn't be fair to say here. So next up, in number 2, at place 35th, that's how extra far we have to go to get the next one, it's Yian Kut-Ku. This made me very happy. I think he very much deserves it. He is quirky, classic, and let's be honest, a little bit of a legend of Monster Hunter, an OG Monster Hunter 1 Birdwyvern, and ultimately, yeah, he is a phenomenal choice for a easy early game monster to fill out a roster that's interesting, that hasn't been seen in a while, and you could make really cool with a makeover that the 5th gen monsters onwards get. Fully Lunastra him, and we have this charming, faithful, yet entirely new Yian Kut-Ku that a whole new generation of hunters can fall in love with. Following that then, at 3rd, we have Akantor at place 44. This is interesting to me, because I deeply believe that Akantor, ukanlos, Black God, White God are probably up there in the top 5 most prime candidates to get another run out, because they themselves are legends. That's why Akantor is so relatively high, despite, again, having nothing to do in the 5th gen. It's a shame ukanlos is so much lower, but you can't really put in one without the other. That would be a little bit strange, I would say. Then again, we got Kushala and Teostra without Chameleos for the longest time, so perhaps, though I think Akantor and ukanlos are much more intrinsically connected than the Elder Trio, in any case, yeah, Wilds has to be, and is, the perfect grounds for a revived Akantor, and imagine the things you could do. Honestly, without any context of the story, or the types of monsters, or even the flagship, we know essentially nothing now, but I could totally see the first title update being Akantor ukanlos. They are kind of the perfect title update package, and that might be something to hold back. Then we have Diamoralis and Yamasukami, again 2 monsters that while they would be awesome, aren't really ever going to likely be chosen. Maybe Yama, it's been so long since Yama and they're still so relatively high up, but still, I just don't see it, right? But one I do see in 61st, and my 4th choice here, Lao-Shan Lung. Yes, he's a big monster, but he's not like an end boss. He's not something that won't return. He has returned, and he is the original big, slow CG fight that paved the way for the likes of Safijiva that took such a high top 20 spot. And I think Lao-Shan Lung really deserves a rebirth into his full potential, because he is a badass design. He's massive, he is a really cool creature, and everything surrounding him really works. He just kind of got restricted by the technology of his day of kind of just being able to walk forwards while you nip at his heels. He is the most ignoring you of ignoring hunts that there is. Even Zora directly targets you a little bit more than Lao-Shan Lung did. He got a bit better in his later forms with more siege weaponry added, but still, he's never really had that kind of oomph. Outside of arguably Monster Hunter Online that did give him a tuned up experience, but still nothing close to what his potential is. And I think him wandering the open space of Wilds would really do a lot. Then the next 3 that I think are fair to skip over here are Cedius, because, you know, he's an underwater whale, and I doubt there's going to be underwater combat in Wilds. It's not impossible, but, like, he's also in that category along with Gogmazios, Dalamadur, that's just sort of not going to come back unless some very special extra circumstance occurs. The same with Nakarkos, again, an end boss that you really need to focus on, build a specific area for, that is a lot of investment to bring back in a new gen, and kind of just has had their time and their place. Then I've also skipped over Great Jaggy here, because I think it's just a boring one to put at the end of this list, though he does make sense, and admittedly, I wouldn't be surprised to see the 3rd gen base Raptor actually make it into Wilds. We got the Jagier in Rise and Sunbreak, so yeah, I could see him being one of the initial options, though then again, they do like to make the lower tier monsters at the start of a new generation actually full new, because it does make it a lot more interesting when you're starting out, so perhaps not. But in any case, at 5th place, at rank 82, which, as I said, is how far you have to go down to get to what I think are 5, both, again, viable and, more importantly, compelling choices if you were going to choose 5 monsters to put in Wilds based on this poll. It is Vespoid Queen. And this one you might be like, what? But look, Vespoid Queen is the OG big bug. Out of nowhere, it's like, oh, they've done a giant bug monster. It's a huge Vespoid, the Queen. That's so cool. In practice, she just kind of hovers there, summons Vespides, and occasionally, you know, spits acidy stuff at you. She's not really the most engaging experience. But clearly people like her because she ranked 82. That is really impressive for this kind of throwaway, almost experiment monster that hasn't been seen in so long. Clearly there is potential there, especially with her commanding the swarm of Vespides. Working that into a fight, perhaps Curio-esque, would be incredible. And she really deserves to get that makeover, that lunastrification, as I'm going to call it, in a new generation of modern Monster Hunter, because you really could do a lot of cool things with, again, the original giant bug monster, especially one that flies, and clearly she's more loved than the Celtuses, despite them being technically much more interesting, both designs and fights. There is just something about, you know, your classic insect queen, queen bee-esque aesthetic, and I think you could really make an amazing fight using her as the base. So that is that, then. The 5 monsters that I really do think wouldn't be crazy to see in Wilds, because they all are interesting, they all have potential to really become special in a 5th gen onwards incarnation, and they all have the popularity to really make an impact without just being immediate repeats from the 5th gen. So let me know what you think, of course, and what your choices would be, and how you see it playing out, but I certainly think there is some food for thought in this. For now then, like if you enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more, consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below, and until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.